Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another AR chat. We realized that we really jumped in and just started inviting you into our conversations. So we wanted to take a step back and say why we're here, who we are, and what you can expect. So I'm Crystal Golightly. I'm joined by Stephen Dickens and Nathan Herrman. And Stephen, would you like to kick us off on sharing why we're here and what folks will expect?
Yeah, so by way of introduction, Stephen Dickens, I'm the CEO and principal analyst of HyperFRAME Research, been an analyst for the last 4 years, and have the pleasure of getting to know Crystal and Nathan. And really the sort of genesis for the podcast for me and the team was the people behind analyst relations, humanizing some of those. There's a lot of people out there on social media platforms talking about the trends and best practices, and we'll do part of that in the podcast. But for me, I think it's more around understanding the people. I'm always fascinated that there's probably only a 1,500, 2,000 people in the world that do this job. And I consensus, I've had that conversation with multiple people, and whilst we don't exactly know, maybe Crystal does through what she does in her line of work, but it's a pretty small community. So I think what's fascinating for me is just getting to know some of the people in that community, getting to know them as people in the way that we get to chat to them. Some of the analysts, again, a pretty small community. I mean, Crystal, you'll know better than me from the ARInsights database, but the amount of analysts who are actually out on the road meeting with vendors and meeting with clients is a pretty small group. So when you add the AR professionals and the AR and the analysts together, you're talking about what's a big high school worth of people. It's not that big a part of the industry, but we touch a lot, we influence a lot, we provide a lot of perspective, we drive a lot of the strategy. So for me, it was really just how do we capture some of that? How do we articulate it for some of those new to the analyst profession, some of those who are just inheriting that? And I'll talk about a lady I spoke to this week who's kind of picked up analyst relations as a VP of marketing for the first time. It's really how do we have some of those conversations? And that came up, Nathan, when you and I were chatting. You then
Yeah.
said it was connected with the conversation you had with Crystal, and then the three of us kind of
Yeah.
get together. I think it's a fascinating space that, as the listeners go with us on the journey over the next few months and years, hopefully, they'll really start to get a different perspective on what's going on and some of the people behind it.
No, it's spot on. I mean, I think it's probably a little bit bigger than a small high school or a big high school. It's maybe a small school district. If you
Yeah.
look, I think Gartner's a few thousand analysts, 2 to 3,000 analysts themselves. So you're not wrong in the sense that it is not a massive community.
Yeah.
And I think when you
It's a
actually,
mid-sized software company worth of people.
there are arguably software companies that are bigger than the entire landscape. Um, So I think even when you break that down further and you look at analysts and analyst relations practitioners, that's almost two sub-communities within the larger community of the analyst landscape, the analyst relations landscape, whatever you want to call it. And we hit on this during our quick 15-minute intro conversation. But this is a job that can be incredibly isolating,
Hmm.
incredibly rewarding, but also incredibly difficult to network in. And so I think one of the things we want to do, one of the things I want to do is just make it seem that, make it seem like this big world is actually maybe just a little bit smaller through these conversations. We go back to our first conversation with Gina. I'd never met Gina. Gina had a ton of incredible insights. But it's just our paths had not crossed. We're not going to the same trade shows. We're not necessarily collaborating on any content for joint go-to-markets, things like that. And so that was an entirely new kind of door that was open to me and an entirely new relationship that I was able to form through that conversation. You look at somebody like Chris, which we spoke to last week. Chris, again, independent practitioner. I know Chris through my work in the IIAR, so the Institute of Influencer and Analyst Relations. We're co-chapter leads for North America. But, Chris is somebody you had not spoken to, Stephen, but you have spoken on LinkedIn. But where people might communicate with one another, it never really go beyond a comment on LinkedIn or a comment here or there.
And
Yes.
Nathan, you didn't do the introductions. You didn't tell people who you were if they're diving in. So
Yeah, I'm Nathan Herrman. I am an analyst relations manager at Ericsson. I have been in analyst relations for about 4.5 years now. I think that sounds right. Before that, I was a high school Spanish teacher. So I was a high school Spanish teacher for 5 years. Um, Through the pandemic, my last year teaching was, I think, 2021. So May of 2021 is when I stopped teaching. That was what I always wanted to do. Uh, when I was in high school and somebody asked me, what do you want to go to college for? It was teaching. It was history teaching at the time. I ended up teaching Spanish because that was an opportunity that was presented to me. Um, but that was always what I wanted to do. And even while I was teaching, that was what I wanted to do. I mean, I was halfway through a master's degree to be a principal by the time I realized that this just wasn't a career I was passionate about anymore. I'm passionate about education. I'm passionate about learning, but just given the macro kind of situation of education, the pandemic at the time, I was just done. I didn't really know what I was going to do next. I knew someone who worked at Spotlight Analyst Relations. They were able to give me a referral. I went through that interview process and I ended up getting a job with Spotlight. I was on the analyst desk, which is entirely analyst facing. And then I switched to the in house kind of role at Cradlepoint. That was in September of 2023.
I think that's where we met, wasn't it? Through Cradlepoint.
Well, no, we met at Spotlight.
Jeez, it goes
Yeah.
way back further than that.
We
Okay.
met at Spotlight because part of the work I was doing at Spotlight was trying to expand kind of the analyst landscape knowledge base.
Yeah.
But yeah, then I hopped over to Cradlepoint in 2023. Um, Still with what was Cradlepoint, but we're now fully a part of Ericsson. And so, yeah, I've been doing that since September of 2023, and that's been a journey in and of itself. It's fantastic. It's very different to be in a consulting environment for analyst relations versus an in-house environment for analyst relations, and it's been great. I've gotten to meet great analysts, great practitioners, great folks like Crystal in the extended ecosystem. And I just want to help facilitate that for others. I want to bring amazing conversations to the forefront and highlight people that deserve to be highlighted.
And Crystal, that's probably a segue to you. Do you want to give
Yeah.
the same?
Stephen, I gotta say, I really enjoy working with you in this because we are just like
You
on.
say all the nicest things, darling. You really do.
Well, that was a great segue, Nathan, because for those that don't know me, I've been at ARInsights for almost 14 years, a software provider of analyst relations. And you would think that 14 years at a one place is absolutely insane, but it's been a great journey. And I think my journey in analyst relations actually is what inspired this podcast. And it's because I realized that, as both of you had said, it's a really small community, right? Approximately, 10 to 12,000 people if we were to look at the analyst landscape and the AR landscape. And if I were to go back to the ARInsights database, I think there's about 7,000 active analysts, about 12,000 broader technology influencers in our ecosystem, and then anywhere from 2 to 4,000 AR people in the ecosystem. So, and that's global, and that may have some sort of people that wear two hats type of deal as well. So, one of the things as I got to know Nathan through the IIAR, little plug right there, another great organization to build more community for AR professionals, is I realized that I actually sit in a really interesting place in our ecosystem where I have the pleasure of getting to know analysts. And I know a lot of AR people, both like, I like to think of Nathan as a rising star in our industry, having
Oh,
deep
thank you.
curiosity and domain expertise, um, and then people that have been around for a long time that have made investments in helping me understand analyst relations. In fact, I just got off of a call where we had a town hall of about 45 AR pros, and we were talking about trends. And I just thought, gosh, I get to have these really great conversations with some of the best people. How do we do that in a scalable way to continue the conversation about why analyst relations, why the work the analysts do is so very valuable, and every single enterprise or technology provider, builder, service provider should know that there is a way to turbocharge or cheat code your strategy and your growth and whatever your goals are. And it's just about activating the right people and creating the right synergies within wherever you are in the technology space. So if you were to ask me my why, it is to invite everyone into these great conversations that I know all three of us have, not only together, but independently. And how do we do that more?
Something to highlight too, kind of off the back of that, is there is no shortage of fantastic and engaging conversations to be had in this world. So whether that's a conversation with an analyst, a conversation with an independent analyst relations practitioner, or an analyst relations practitioner that works within an enterprise or a smaller vendor, like rarely, I don't want to say never because that's an absolute and only Sith deal in absolutes, as Stephen knows. But I rarely do you have a conversation in this world and not leave incredibly impressed with just how knowledgeable, inquisitive, and engaging these folks are.
I think the interesting thing for me, and I'll go back to something you said in your introduction, Nathan, this can be quite an isolating kind of environment. It can be isolating for some of the teams in the vendors. I'm
Yes,
maybe one or two people I'm working with. What's actually a mid-sized software company, and there's one lady who does analyst relations. She's a team. I call it the me, myself, and I team. A team of analyst relations. Then you've got a bunch of independent analysts who are solo. But even if you're in a Gartner or an IDC or a Forrester, you could be on a technology beat that you are the only person or only one of two or three people in that huge company that covers that space. I operate in the mainframe space, and I think Gartner's got two or three people max in that space. So there's not a lot of people, even within some of the biggest companies, in some of the biggest vendors, in some of the biggest analyst relation firms. It's a pretty isolated role. And I think one of the things I'm invested in for why this podcast, and I'll sort of throw it open to you guys of kind of the why you're here. But for me, I'm a networker just by kind of my DNA. And I think if we can bring some of that to some of those isolated professionals, and they can tune in once every couple of weeks and go, oh, here's another person doing what I'm doing and struggling with the same challenges that I'm struggling with, and kind of understand the landscape. That's going to make it a little bit less isolated for those individuals. And if that's a good thing, which I think it is,
it
that's a
is.
good contribution back to the community.
We have been very intentional as we've sat down and kind of planned out who we might want to bring on to the show, and that's an evolving process. But I think one of the things that has really stuck with me is we are trying to, over the course of, the next 12 months and hopefully beyond, is bring on both analyst relations practitioners and analysts. And I think that's so important because I go back to something John Rockhold shared last year with his analyst survey, where analysts feel that they are often just a means to an end. Um, and that's kind of how our industry has set up, in that I'm an analyst relations professional, analysts are my key constituency. But that's not how it should be. It's a meaningful two-way relationship. And more than that, I want to help bridge that gap in this more social setting because, Stephen, we don't do the same job necessarily. I'm not a technologist in the same way you are a technologist, but that doesn't mean I shouldn't hear about your experiences and also just have a chat about analyst relations with you and vice versa. You can pick my brain about technology coverage. I mean, we're a two-sided industry, but there's so much room to meet in the middle.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So I think I think let's do a quick fire. I've had a bunch of questions since we've started doing this, and you guys have probably had the same. Why are we here? What can people expect? And just some of the mechanics of the thing of this podcast going forward. So, kind of, why? I'll go first. Why am I here? Connect people, understand a little bit more around this profession that I've found myself in over the last 4 years, and get to meet some fantastic people. What can people expect? Conversations with some of the best and the brightest from the analyst relations space, analysts, and people in the ecosystem. And then, sort of, the mechanics. It's going to be a 20-minute, half an hour call every 2 weeks. We're going to rotate the hosting duties round just so that you don't get bored of my voice or Crystal. Well, you'd never get bored of Crystal's voice, but maybe me and Nathan you may get bored of if we do the hosting.
Absolutely.
So we're going to rotate it round. So those are the things that you can expect, I think, from my perspective. Crystal, what does it mean for you, and what can people expect?
Yeah, I think that for me, I just want to grow the opportunities of what is the end goal, which is having business impacts, right, across the board, and then tell that story and create an opportunity for us to connect and learn from each other while having a laugh. Because you have to have fun while we do it. We have the fortune of, honestly, I think, being in the best industry. And yeah, I want to do that at scale. Uh like you said, love to have a episode out every 2 weeks just to keep you all inspired and engaged. What
I've
was it?
not convinced you to call it fortnightly yet.
I have to practice my English. And
Yeah,
not my
that's
American English. So yeah, you'll definitely, everyone should expect a little bit of a joking and all of that around here too,
we
because
have a lot of fun, and I think it's important to carry that over. I mean,
Yeah.
Nathan, what are you expecting?
No, I mean, I would agree. I mean, I could take this in a few different ways. I think first and foremost, it's visibility for the guests. Again, if you're out on LinkedIn and you're active on LinkedIn, you probably do see the conversations about analyst relations and analyst firms. But that's only the surface level of what there is to talk about. And more than that, that's only the surface level of who there is to showcase. I
Mhm.
mentioned Gina again, and I'll go back to that. Haven't ran into Gina on LinkedIn. The conversation with Gina was so illuminating. And so it kind of segues into the second reason for doing this is I want to learn. Look, I am an early career and analyst relations practitioner. Like I said, 4 to 4.5 years is how long I've been doing this. There are some people that have been doing this for a lot longer and have so much experience and vast treasure troves of insights to share. Just like I would want to get insights from an analyst, I want to get insights from my peers. So for me, it's visibility, bringing people into the conversation and just showing the wider community that they have an incredibly important story to tell. I think the second thing is me personally, I want to grow in my craft and my trade, and I would hope other listeners do as well. And the third thing is just community. It kind of goes hand in hand with visibility, but because this can be isolating, like we talked about, because there are a low tens of thousands of people in this wider landscape, making it clear that you are not alone, that you have other people to talk to, and that you have other people to reach out to and network with and sit down and have a coffee with at a trade show. Like that's so important.
So bring us home, Crystal. Wrap us up.
oh wow, I didn't think about the wrap up. So as we close, I just want to say thank you everyone for tuning in to AR Chat. We look forward to seeing you in the next 2 weeks. Thanks, Stephen and Nathan, for showing up and partnering in this raising the tides, whatever the boats, those
Rising tide lifts
yeah.
all boats. There you go.
Exactly. And that's exactly what you'll expect from AR Chat. Some real authentic humans saying real authentic things.
I love that.
We'll see you next time.